Welcome to All Saints Catholic School e-learning. Today we are working it out in English and focusing on atavism in the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. By the end of this video, you will have recalled what atavism means, considered how this concept links to the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and analysed how Stevenson explores this idea in the text. Before we begin, let's recall our big idea, atavism. Take a few moments to read the statements on your screen and select the 3 statements that you think are true. You can pause the video whilst you do this. Okay, hopefully you have managed to recall the fact that A, atavistic traits are the reappearance of the trait that has been lost during evolution. B, Lombroso believed that criminality was inherited and that criminals could be identified by the physical defects that confirmed them as being atavistic or savage. And finally, E, Lombroso attempted to identify the physical characteristics common to criminals and labelled these common traits as atavistic or throwback traits that determined primitive criminal behaviour. Well done. So how does atavism link to your topic? Stevenson's Gothic novella was and still is extremely popular because he skillfully manipulates Victorian anxieties. In London, fear and terror was high as the infamous Jack the Ripper had committed a spate of unsolved murders that remain unsolved today. Several theories suggested that this murderer was highly educated or of royal birth, and this fear ran parallel with Stevenson's shattered social veneer in the novella, through the revelation that the respectable and moral character of Dr. Jekyll also was the immoral murderer Mr. Hyde. Now, Caesar Lombroso's theory of atavism appears to have greatly influenced Stevenson's novella. The unsettling, displeasing and dwarfish appearance of Edward Hyde and the extreme and violent behaviour that he exhibits are clear atavistic traits. As a character, Mr. Hyde represents the more animalistic and primitive side of mankind. Stevenson deliberately makes the character physically displeasing in order to play on the Victorian belief in physiognomy, which is the belief that a person's facial features or expression indicates their character. It's important to note that Stevenson deliberately uses this animalistic language and references to primitive man in order to create fear and terror through Mr. Hyde. This plays on the fear that Mr. Hyde's physical characteristics reflect him as a person. The way that he looks reflects the fact that he is a criminal. Now let's work this out and answer a key question. How does Stevenson present Hyde as a frightening outsider in the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Within your response, you want to try to link the idea of Hyde being presented as a frightening outsider to the scientific concept of atavism. You also want to explore the language choices, the effect of the key words and the language techniques used, as well as the intended effect that Stevenson is trying to create for his reader. Let's have a go at this now. Before you begin, let's try this together using a similar task. Let's explode the quote. Our key quotation today is, "With ape-like fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot and hailing down a storm of blows." And this has been taken from Chapter 4, the Carew murder case. And it describes Hyde's horrific murder of Sir Danvers Carew. Now, the animalistic references create the image that Hyde is behaving like a throwback, a primitive man. The violent verbs highlight the feral rage with which Hyde attacks Sir Danvers Carew, and the metaphor hailing down a storm of blows details the sheer force and unrestrained anger that Hyde expresses during this violent attack. Furthermore, the simile ape-like fury links to Stevenson's presentation of Hyde as an angry, aggressive, primitive caveman, and this behaviour is atavistic, and it deems Hyde a criminal deviant. Here Stevenson presents Hyde as a frightening and threatening outsider who doesn't conform to the rules of society, and this in turn threatens to destabilise that positive and moralistic facade of Victorian society, and creates an atmosphere of terror, and Hyde's uninhibited outburst heightens the tension and fear for the reader. Now it's over to you. It's your chance to explode a quotation. Take a look at the quote, "God bless me, the man seems hardly human, something troglodytic, shall we say?" taken from Chapter 2, The Search for Mr. Hyde. Pause this video and explode your quote. Now let's consolidate your learning and explode this quote together. Now Utterson says this when he sees Hyde for the first time. He's taken aback by Hyde's physical appearance, which is highlighted in his reference to "God bless me." And the alliterative phrase "hardly human" emphasises Hyde's unnatural and animalistic appearance, which links to the theory of atavism and the Victorian society's fear of devolving back to primitive man. Now remember, Victorian society was highly reserved, religious and concerned with respectability. Now these atavistic traits and their links to crime threaten the stability of this ideal society. The exclamatory sentences and rhetorical questions highlight Utterson's shock and disbelief when he sees Hyde's face for the first time, and the fact that it's described as troglodytic is even more significant, as a troglodyte is a caveman. And through this remark, Utterson is implying that Hyde reminds him of a primitive race of people. This sentiment was one consistent with the British mindset in the late Victorian era due to the British Empire. Stevenson's description of Hyde as troglodytic suggests the character exhibits throwback atavistic traits, and he uses these atavistic traits and Hyde's downright detestable physical appearance to make the reader feel uneasy. By likening Hyde to primitive man, Stevenson presents the character as a frightening outsider who makes the reader feel fear because he's unpredictable and acts on instinct and is repulsive rather than behaving rationally. Great work! You have recalled what atavism means and considered how this concept links to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and you have analysed how Stevenson explores this idea in the text. So well done.